So today, the topic that I'm taking to discuss with you all in this session is about faith, trust, and surrender. Three different words with three different meanings, but which are used interchangeably quite often. We will see what the differences are, what is faith, what is trust, and finally about surrender. Faith is essentially a belief in a person before having any experience of the person. Therefore, when we talk of faith in Swami, we are talking of having belief in Swami before having any experience. Trust is a capability or a position that we attain after we give value to the faith. That means it is faith in action. It is not that the faith that we just keep having in our minds and we move on, this person is probably God and we move on. That is the stage of faith. When we question, is he truly God? How do I know that he is truly God? And we try and get answers to those questions. That is when we're talking of growth of trust in us. When does this trust reach a pinnacle? In my estimate, I can be only making conjectures here because I definitely have not reached that stage of culmination where trust has reached the level of maturity that it should be. I feel the trust will be so strong in each one of us that we will know that Swami knows our innermost thoughts even before those thoughts arise in us. So once we reach that level of conviction, the question is, do we need to say anything at all? A few more experiences before I come back onto this. Swami has lovingly given us that trust at various levels. For example, this was about the concept of writing letters to Swami. I used to write a lot of letters, and every time Swami used to come and take those letters from me. This went on for quite a long period of time. And then there was one of those discourses that happened where Swami was talking about writing letters, and he said, devotees write all these letters. I actually know what they are writing before they finish writing, and I still go and take those letters from them only to give them satisfaction. And when he was saying that, he was looking at me straight in the eye, and he said, therefore I really don't need people to write letters to me. To me, it was a message coming from God straight into my heart. So I took it to heart and I stopped writing letters. But then apparently the lesson was not firmly entrenched into my consciousness. So after a while, the mind went back and said, hey, if you wrote letters, you can get a chance of Pada Namaskar as well. You can get close to Swami. So don't lose the opportunity. So that game was played on us, on our trust. This is an interesting facet of Swami. As your trust is initially very, very weak, he will not give you those challenging situations where he shakes the building to see how strong it is. But as your trust grows, there will be many such episodes where the building will be shaken. I'll come back to that briefly. But yes, I started writing letters, and Swami again started taking those letters. This went on for a brief period of time. Then one of those days, he gave me that look. I referred to that look from the interview room when he stopped the rain. This was one such look where he said, you know what I mean, right? And then that was the end of taking letters from me. But for Swami, unless the message is now burnt into your psyche, he doesn't stop. So that day, in the afternoon, when I came into the room, a sister handed over a parcel of letters and said, you keep getting the first row and you keep getting Pada Namaskar every day. We are sitting right at the back. Why don't you hand over these letters to Swami? And I said, Sister, there is really no need for us to write letters to Swami because he knows the contents even before they are written. For which I got a slight rebuke. The sister said, see, you get your first row every time and you get your Pada Namaskar, so you feel there is no need to give letters. But then we want to give the letters. And I think that's the only way we are able to communicate with him. I said, okay, if you feel you should get the message clearly from the Lord, give the letters to me, you will get his answer in the afternoon. So for afternoon darshan, I go in, and so does the sister. And believe it or not, that dear sister who was usually sitting somewhere towards the far end of the lines, today got a first row, got her Pad Namaskar. Swami smiled at her, a very knowing smile obviously. And me, who was getting Pada Namaskar morning and evening that trip, got my token number 17. Okay, so I was sitting at a distance where there was absolutely no way I could hand over any letters to him. And Swami looked at me and gave me the smile too. So then I went back to my sister and said, I hope you got your message. Gave her the letters. She said, no, I started getting my Pada Namaskar, I'll pass the letters myself. And true enough, next day morning, she's back to the last row in darshan with the letters in her hand. I'm back to my first row getting Pada Namaskar. You know, so this is the kind, he actually burns that message into your psyche. You don't need to write letters, don't write it. Similarly, a few months later, a far more intense experience this time, far more intense, about wanting to have interviews with Swami. All of us in this universe would love to have an interview with the Lord of the universe. Who would not want it? But then he has given me enough messages, and I must mention here that most of these messages are at the mental level because communication with Swami is ongoing and is all the time. So, and those messages are ratified every once in a while, so I really don't need to have physical interaction with Swami all the time for me to get messages from him. So he had several times told me, should not need an interview. But then I did long for an interview, and therefore, since I was not getting the message, Swami had to give me a lesson which will burn the message into the psyche, as I said. So this loving Lord of ours, when he gives messages to enhance our trust, in the initial stages it's done the moment you ask for it. But as your trust grows, you necessarily don't get the results that you're asking for, even if you think you're doing it in all earnestness. Because here is a point where we must question ourselves. When we are in the initial stages of our trust building, our queries to Swami are usually very, very earnest. But as we get comfortable, because he has given us 100 such experiences, we get very comfortable and almost take Swami for granted, And then our earnestness starts to dip. At that point in time, the quality of our experiences also change. And then Swami starts testing our trust. He shakes the building to see, is this fellow really got the message across? So, like I said about the interview, Swami gave me a tough lesson, and this is what I call from Swami messages which are life-changing lessons. He gives those as well. If you are not able to get the message that he is sending you, or if you decide to ignore it often enough, Swami will give you a life-changing lesson. That is something that you will not be able to forget even if you're woken up from deep sleep. So that is the kind of message he gave me on wanting to have an interview with Swami and so on. So this is the kind of interaction, this is the kind of lessons we get from Swami as the trust building happens. And I said, he shakes your faith. He shakes your trust over a period of time to see how strong the building is, because nobody would want to add multiple stories to a building which is unsteady, right? Similarly, unless your trust has reached a certain level, God will not give you experiences of a different nature. So he will shake our trust to see how firm our trust is. So what will happen is, even when you think you're praying in all earnestness, you may not see the results coming through the way you expect. This is where actually the growth is happening. He's taking you to a different level. He says, don't expect results. Your results do not have to be in line with what your action is. And this is an important point actually which all of us should imbibe. In the simplest of actions in life, for example, if we are stepping out of home wanting to reach a destination in the next half an hour, we might choose based on our experience whatever set of actions we need to do. But those actions are very, very small part of the entire journey, because on the road there are millions of other people, there is a transportation that we take, and then we reach a destination. There could be lots of things that happen, and there could be many a slip between the cup and the lip, right? So the quality of the experience we have is not solely dependent on the effort that we put in. This is something that we have to imbibe. There are lots of other contributing factors, many a time, and actually in most of the occasions we have no control over those. So if we feel that we have, for example, studied extremely hard for an exam and therefore we should perform very well in the exam, is not necessarily true, because we don't know what kind of examination paper is, and when the examiner was setting the question paper, what kind of a mood he was in, and so on. So the result does not necessarily follow the effort alone. That is the knowledge that is imparted to us as trust grows, because we start accepting the results as they come. This is where in the Gita Krishna says, Karmanyeva dhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Don't have attachment to the fruit, because the fruit does not depend solely on your action. So that is the stage where slowly trust reaches its maturity. And in my conjecture, I say the word conjecture because I'm nowhere near that stage. Finally, we would probably reach a stage where there would be a studied silence. There would be no need for words, because you are dealing with your innermost reality, one who knows your thoughts before they become thoughts. What is the need to communicate? So once we reach that stage, probably the building is now ready for the roof to be put in. For the roof to be put in is called surrender, in my understanding. And that surrender obviously is not entirely our doing. Just like faith was something which divinity chose us to give. Once we reach a level of readiness, and that is what is in our hand when we go on the journey of trust, we make ourselves eligible for the experience, we make ourselves ready and keep us open to take in whatever comes. And then the divine reveals itself in all its splendor, and the roof of the building is put in, and the sculptor beams his smile of happiness. Sairam.